third part.
I'm going to talk about the humanitarian issue now. I was just thinking I should give some context about why this thing happened, because in July 2012, the Free Syrian Army entered Aleppo from the countryside. In almost 3 days, they occupied a number of neighborhoods in the city, neighborhoods which are mostly close to the countryside, but it was big neighborhoods with a large number of people. So of course the regime's response was to bomb the neighborhoods immediately, and thousands of people were displaced and came to the other half of the western side of Aleppo. This is why we talk about the eastern side and the western side, because the western side remained mostly unoccupied by the Free Army forces. It was occupied by the regime and the other side under their control, so there are always conflicts between the two. So it was summer, and they, the displaced people, came to the government buildings like schools and other government facilities that were empty at the time. And immediately, I don't know how these things got organized so quickly, but it was crazy because in a matter of 2 days, hundreds of people came to clean the schools and prepare them with. We took out the desks and everything to make enough space, and everyone started working at the schools. We were divided into school systems. Every school had staff that was working there mostly, and we did classes, school classes, and we were feeding all these people with contributions that were coming from other people living in Aleppo. Of course, we were also working before that happened, because there were refugees coming from homes and other places far away from Aleppo, but never at such a large scale, because there were now thousands of people leaving their neighborhoods and coming to schools. So as time progressed, there were more and more, what would I call them, people who used to be active in the revolution, who, when the Free Syrian Army entered the city, all the activities stopped. From magazines, every, revolutionary outlet, no matter what it is, it stopped. And all the people active at that time became humanitarian workers. They started working in schools, n'importe quoi.
Why did all the activities stop?
Well, I think, first of all, because the neighborhoods that the Free Syrian Army occupied were the same neighborhoods that we would usually demonstrate in, and they were being bombed and the people were leaving. So the Free Syrian Army kind of blocked the only neighborhoods that we could be active in. And at the same time, there were a lot of changes going on. Even most of the people we were working with on the magazine, a lot of them used to live in these neighborhoods, so they moved and the groups got a little broken. And the fact that they had no other thing to do made them kind of move into the humanitarian aid. What can I say? There weren't any discussions being held at that time. Everyone was trying to focus on sparing these people, the suffering that they have or they endured, and how we can help them not to feel like they are displaced. There were a lot of small theater acts, and we showed them movies sometimes, but everything headed in that direction. We stopped everything we were doing. Everything was on hold.
But the theater acts, like what?
Like there were 3 people who used to work with puppets and things.
Oh, you mean for children?
Yes.
And movies like...
Actually, M was someone who occupied that position, so it were mostly cartoons, mostly for children. No one really thought about... Yes, and there were doctors there also, but I left shortly afterwards, so I don't know what happened exactly later.
I just wanted to add something here about when the Free Army entered the city. They didn't take any responsibility about the people's safety, or they didn't alert people to leave this area because they would occupy it at least. They just entered the city, and they changed the whole situation. So now we should, as a civilian movement, we should now deal with humanitarian issues, regardless what we were working on before, like magazines or demonstrations or whatever thing we were doing. So the whole city was hanged.
They were occupying civilian neighborhoods, and they knew what the consequences were going to be. The regime doesn't really care about anything, really.
Everybody was happy. We were talking about activists, demonstrators, because the first day, Z told me about it, all the security were in their base, hiding in their bases.
What security?
Intelligence forces, police. So it was like, there is no police in the street. I don't know why I mentioned this, but I think this situation just makes that people don't blame the Free Syrian Army. I'm talking about demonstrators. They don't blame them.
They were the saviors at that time. I don't know if this is worth mentioning, But when we were working at the schools, I saw a lot of my old friends who used to support the regime, actually. But they came to these schools to work. They took this as a humanitarian, non-biased territory where they can come and work together.
And the church was involved in this.
Yes, of course. There was a monastery. They were the organized ones that were working on this before this happened in Aleppo, with displaced people from other cities.
But all the food was sent by this organization?
No, these were contributions mostly. A lot of people would buy bread and sometimes send money, especially that it was Ramadan at that time when the Free Syrian Army entered the city. But it was crazy. The people that were displaced, sometimes they thought that you worked for them. I remember because in Ramadan most of the shops are closed until very late at night. And one person came and he said that he wanted shampoo. No, he said that he wanted hair gel actually. And I tried not to scream at him, but I really couldn't. Why are you asking me for hair gel? Or what should I do now? Demand and supply, you supply here. What do you want me to do? But I think it sucked the life out of people who were active before in the revolution. We were starting to see this, because we were starting to see atrocities being committed by the others, by the other army. And I don't know, we stopped seeing the revolution from how we used to see it. It was becoming more of a humanitarian kind of thing. It was the situation we were put in. You could sit home and do nothing because you couldn't do what you used to do. Or you would come here and work with people who were suffering and becoming Mother Teresa, you know, becoming this and listening to stories about how people, and I'm not saying it's because we didn't go through this, but sometimes when this is all you are getting, all you are hearing, this affects how you see the revolution. It becomes misery when it used to be work and energy and everything. Then I couldn't see how I am doing anything. I felt like I was just handling the consequences of what was going on. I wasn't changing anything. I had no effect. I was like a straw in the ocean. So I left. I left Syria. And on the way I saw for the first time the countryside of Aleppo, which was destroyed. I never visited these areas before. And then on the borders, a Free Syrian Army patrol stopped us. They wanted our passports. So my father was with me and he gave my passport to him. So he was checking the passport and he said, "Why are you giving me her passport? She is a woman." This is the last scene I had in Syria. And it is so ugly to actually witness that really this is what all of this has led to. This is how you say goodbye, you know, to me. The guy from the Free Syrian Army Battalion, he told my father, "Why are you giving me her passport? She is a girl." He meant that he shouldn't look at a woman's face.
It's kind of religious.
Kind of?
Yes, it's a mix between religious and psychopath.
Where do we go from here?
On the other side, this story.
Do you know what you want to talk about?
About the magazine.
Okay.
So the idea was to create some platforms to work on a cultural base. To write something, to record some songs, make some art, so on and so on. We had 3 ideas: magazine, radio, and music band. We started with the magazine. We were 6, 5 males and 1 female at the beginning. The female was not our. We didn't have any skills about how we could make a magazine. We didn't have any background about how we could write an article. So we decided to just write an introduction page. And the other articles, we collected them from writers we talked to through Facebook. So we weren't so interested by the content, especially with the first issue. Of course, we put some flyers and criteria for topics, but we didn't focus on this thing. Instead, we were focusing on how many issues we will print and how we could distribute them. We didn't have a network to communicate with, so people started to look for people. We didn't know them except from Skype. The whole situation was so dangerous. There's nothing to stand on, and we took this decision and printed the magazine. So when we succeeded with the first issue, it was like a dream, you know? With the second issue, we focused more than before. I started to write Z also in R2. So, in the second issue, we got 4 articles, and our group and another 4 articles from the social network. So it was developed like this. And in the third one, I got 2 articles, Z also, and it is Now I Know What I'm Doing inside the magazine, A also, A2. All the group of Tamarad, name of the magazine, Rebel, had specific missions to achieve. So we became a group, a real group, organized but we failed to continue this project for a lot of reasons. One of them was that it was hard to continue at the same rhythm, and we didn't prepare ourselves to print one issue every 10 days. Every 10 days we should print something new. For that, we got an alternative solution. So we started not focusing just on printing the magazine. We started to print posters and going at night and put posters on the walls.
What was written on these posters?
For example, we met a girl on Facebook. She is a digital designer, and we asked her to design something about Kalashnikov and the violence and the non-violence too, or the acceptable violence, the alternative violence, we would say. So she designed a photo that showed a woman.
It was a pinup, actually. It was a pinup, right?
What? Pinup?
Pinup, the American ones.
If you don't have a Kalashnikov, you could use a Molotov, it was written.
Switch to Molotov.
With a tutorial for how you make a Kalashnikov.
Molotov.
Oh, Molotov.
To come back to the magazine, how did you distribute it?
For example, we knew someone who worked in the coordination, and he had access to this area. Let's say he had access to 100 persons. So we would give him, let's say, 25 issues. Our standard was 1 issue for 4 persons, and so on and so on. We just had a circle of persons working on the countryside, working in the neighborhood. We'd give to someone, and this person would give 3 or 4 others, and these 4 would give like this.
Did you get a lot of feedback on the magazine?
Yes, actually, and the Facebook page was a little bit active with comments and shares, and it was a little bit famous in this time period.
In the region of Aleppo or also outside of it?
Especially in the region of Aleppo, but we printed 1 issue in Daraa, distributed also dozens of issues in Salamiyya, but mostly on the countryside in the city of Aleppo. There was a link between us and other magazines in other cities, so we printed another magazine from them inside Aleppo and distributed it for them, and they did the same for us. So it was like this: we don't have anybody in Daraa, but we wanted to give some messages to Daraa, for example, so we could print something there.
There was a lot of cooperation between different magazines, and a lot of magazines in different areas of Syria would exchange their newspapers and distribute it to the maximum amount of people possible.
Yes, and also we built a cross-connection between each other. It was like we built a syndicate for magazines.
Because a lot of magazines were being established in different places. Because I worked in alternative media, the website, a lot of them were actually quite good. I mean, maybe their strategy was very different from Rebel magazine, but they had interesting ideas.
Yeah, but we were the best one.
You didn't talk about the radio yet.
Yes, we recorded. We started with 1 program.
On the internet?
No, actually, we were just recording. We started preparing some substance to start with. So we were just recording to achieve, let's say, 5 hours and start with 5 hours streaming. And after that, we continue like this. That was the plan. But what happened, it was very difficult. We succeeded in recording 40 minutes, actually, because of the problem in the group. You know, you have a lot of activities now. You have a radio activity, a magazine activity, a singing activity, and we succeeded with the magazine, and in the beginning, it was so new. We should try again, and at some point, it becomes a little boring. Kind of something you have to do. On the other hand, the musician band, it was fun, because they had the chance to go to one of the most famous villages in the countryside of Aleppo, which would become the capital of the Free Syrian Army. I'm trying to remember the name of the village. Mare. Okay, no, it doesn't matter. But people there, they were so conservative, and most of the songs were kind of leftist, or you would say communist, because the singer, he used to be a communist, and after that, he had a lot of leftist ideas, so it is not acceptable to sing that kind of songs in that place. But it worked. For some reason, it didn't bother people, and they would listen to them, and everything was fine for the group, and it was kind of an achievement. And so we started to think about how we should be prepared for when we could occupy the main square in Aleppo. The musician band should be better than every musician that is inside this. And they started to work more to develop the musician band, so there was no singer professional. It was just the group who was singing together. So we started to make an invitation and to make interviews for singers, to test their voices, and something like that. It was so funny to begin with this project because we met a lot of people, and we tried a lot of different types of music. I wrote 2 songs, but silly ones, just mocking the situation. The musician band was released 3 months after the magazine, and it had like 10 or 12 songs. Yes, at the end of the project, we made only 1 issue outside of Syria. We tried to. Maybe it could work. But the whole motivation and the power we had got clashed because we got all the power from people, you know? People gave us feedback, not just on the virtual life. We needed physical contact with people. We printed and distributed around the countryside and in the city. And when we left, all that disappeared. So all of us recognized that there is no meaning from doing anything with the magazine anymore. Especially, there was no source of money like we got in Syria. Because there we were in our homes, our families were supporting us. And now we needed to get a job and take care of our basic needs. So most of us were thinking about how we could deal with these conditions. This with managing the magazine. But we failed this mission, so we decided to stop with all this work, and we looked for a new solution, and we looked for a new meaning for this magazine, to not let this magazine get hanged. And I don't know, maybe in the future we could continue this magazine. It means a lot to me, because most of my memories, my revolution memories, are connected to this magazine. But I should correct this. The plan was to make the magazine to be like every 15 days, or maximum 1 month. But what was happening, for example, I got arrested, or somebody got injured, or would have an exceptional situation and should deal with it. So there was no, rhythm, a stable rhythm to this magazine. It was a kind of problem because people think it was just one number and it's gone. And then after 3 months, oh, it's the second. You should build a stable relation with readers, not every random, okay, now. It was crazy like this.
You still want to add something?
No.
يكون من كاين شعبي مثل القدر من ينتخيه ماين شعبي مثل القدر والأمل باين يا حيف أخو يا حيف.
Afterward. I met A in 2013 on a travel to Egypt. He was stranded in Cairo, as were so many Syrians during Morsi's rule. I met him and some of the comrades with whom he created the Tamarod magazine. Their travel continued afterwards, some years in Turkey, and then from Greece on toward Western Europe, the infamous refugee route. M, a Syrian comrade who had been living in exile in Egypt for years and participated in the Syrian Revolution as a surgeon, brought me into contact with this group. We spent some evenings together looking for a quiet spot in the ever-bustling Cairo. Accompanied by Mo, an Egyptian revolutionary, we sat along the river Nile or drank some beer in Café Huria. We talked about cultural expressions, such as movies and literature, and about revolution, of course. All was about revolution in those days. All conversations led toward that beloved topic. Even if massacre was on its way to Egypt, the battle against Morsi was full on. Even if barrel bombs were dropping on Syria, there I was, sitting with these comrades who made me feel what their revolution was all about. It is a strange thing to come into contact with people living a revolution, and it blew me away. And I am certainly not talking about cultural differences. I'm referring to an état d'esprit, so wide, so open, so full of fervent vibration, experiencing something I could only grasp before losing it again. I got convinced that the most beautiful thing about revolution are its people who are ready to defend it, to discuss it, and above all to live it. Thinking about Egypt still makes one nostalgic, as leaving it has made me lovesick. Going back, the reality of pacified democracy felt like waking up from a dream, full of thorny roses. As love can catch you and change your view upon the world surrounding you, so does revolution, and it does the job in a thoroughly profound way. You can't compare it, but somehow you can. The pain accompanied by a lost case is like the pain of love lost. So getting back to Europe, I missed the people of the revolution, their passion and love for change, their desire for change, which was not a placid theoretical one, but a real experience that goes beyond limits of which one cannot imagine. What will be there to find? I missed that vividness, their urgent interest in exchanging ideas and confronting views, and their openness toward them. The Syrian comrades told me about the magazine they created back home and about their printer stuck in a war zone, explained to me about their will to continue the project once arrived in Turkey. They told me many stories of which I understood not even half, and were very attentive and interested in what I had to say. They were fully aware that the world didn't give a fuck about the Syrian revolution. Many revolutionaries in Egypt turned away from expressing solidarity with the Syrian revolution since Islamic involvement became clear. European anarchists didn't take up their responsibility as revolutionaries in this case at all. Let's say it was a revolution too easy to not care about because too hard to understand, and Islamist and not revolutionary, or it's a civil war, let's forget about it, and I will not get involved in a humanitarian aid. For my part, I felt ashamed. It's not that we didn't try to express our solidarity with the Syrian revolution back home, but I needed to admit to myself that I hadn't had the courage to really open up the Syrian chapter of the revolution book. The many images of mutilated and murdered bodies, of bombarded children and tortured elderly, which one could come across in European cities, spread by the Syrians living abroad, blocked me. The image created was one of defeat, of mass murder, of atrocity, and nothing else. It lacked the other side of the coin. Therefore, I wasn't incited to search for the story beyond death, and so my solidarity toward the Syrian revolution had been a shallow one, lacking depth and a true attempt at understanding. But the Syrian comrades attracted my attention. Yes, it was a question of feeling, and since this was the case, and it became impossible for me to warm up people back home for this cause, but I searched for the powerful story of this revolution, the story that will forever remain inaccessible for the ones not willing to know, for the ones not willing to make an effort. A told me in Cairo that the one who wants to know about the Syrian revolution will find his answers. And it's true. Are you willing to learn, to meet with a world of magic and tragic, to leave racist prejudice behind? Because the Syrian story will forever remain a closed book for the one who is fed by fear of losing the grip on their fixed frames to interpret the world, to let go of these anchors for a moment and watch the difficult reality of conflict and contradictions, to be able to watch it without pre-constructed moral judgments or idealized views upon what the fuck is revolution. Because revolution is contradiction. Revolution is an ongoing fight between different currents. It is a conflict between reaction and whoever wants to push the revolution further and further beyond any limits known to humankind. Revolution is not a clean story, something which we can only believe if we read holy books or seek for holiness in the books we read. So if we need to make the effort not only for the Syrian revolution, but for revolution in general, it is an effort of sitting together, gathering the necessary information, analyzing, making the necessary contacts, and deciding upon what to do. But not only. First and foremost, it is an effort at mental openness, an effort at leaving the revolutionary I know everything arrogance behind, a preliminary condition without which we cannot even start imagining a project. The Syrian revolution is an underestimated revolution. Revolutionaries elsewhere have not lost many hours of sleep thinking or acting in solidarity with the events. More generally, we can say that there is a huge lack of courage for confronting oneself to this thing. Revolutionaries pretend to desire a revolution. A lack of courage and certain laziness, because yes, it takes an effort to understand, a big effort, and one can always easily say that my own context is more pressing or more easy to understand. Thereby we can forget about what's going on and read books about it in the years to come, to discuss about it in 20 years' time when all is dead and we can sigh together that revolution is always on the losing side. And we can dream about revolution without even realizing that what we are able to dream is nothing in comparison to what Syrians have lived. We can invent purified versions of conflicts which will never help us at living them, since we will always find some excuses as to why this conflict doesn't meet up to our expectations of a purely anti-authoritarian revolt. Anarchists are somehow relics of a world passed away, holding on to the past, getting lost in the present, not knowing how to confront dream with reality, preferring to dream than to create. Anarchists are dreamers, an undeniable and necessary quality if one wants to storm the existent, but as well one that can make an individual by moments utterly incapable of intervening because the dreams seem too unreachable, and so why would it even matter to try? But our dreams and ideas are not there to be protected in its purity for days more beautiful to come. They are there to be used in order to destroy this world of chains today. At least I wanted to say that revolution is not a matter of scales and points and evaluations, saying, oh, this one, it lacked point number 5 and 7, and this one is my favorite. We are not at school. Revolution is striving, always difficult, always beautiful and passionate, and equally cruel and devastating. There are no objective criteria to decide upon what is a revolution. We will leave this question to history teachers, because revolution is a givenness. When it's going on, it's going on. Let's please stop this crap of deciding upon whether these were revolutions or not, because if we are not able to acknowledge that they are, we will only be able to stand in solidarity with the history books and love the teacher instead of the living revolutionary. And we can forget about getting to what it is we have to do to act in solidarity, to search for ways of giving blows to reaction, to understand what is going on and the games power is playing in order to know how to attack the world we are living in. I am convinced that the current situation in Syria and elsewhere is partly due to the lack of revolutionaries' mental courage to put oneself at the side of courageous revolutionary, not wind but storm. In the Arab world, we need to reflect upon this. The interview with our comrades R and A is a contribution to the discussion about how we could organize to make connections between fights taking place in different contexts. Realizing we are living in the same world, are living in the same oppression, and that the struggle against it needs to be an international one. Our reality is much closer to the Syrian one than we often realize. The current militarization on European soil and its borders, as well as the recuperation of negating forces by Islamic tendencies, give us a cruel proof of it. But that is food for another text. I, as others, have been looking for ways of expressing solidarity with different revolutions taking place. The lack of comrades willing to act makes it a task difficult to bear once revolutions are shattered into blood. Prison and reaction, once we need to be tough and persistent, knowing why we do it even if it's not easy nor magnificent. This interview offers an anarchist perspective on revolution, lived by comrades of ours. In Syria, as elsewhere, anarchists try to forge their way in the tumult of the present. So let's continue our attempts, get more intelligent, and leave the ready-made answers behind. Let's discuss, let's look at the events from an internationalist perspective, and let's do the necessary effort, fearless and without prejudices, as is revolution.
يا حافن يا حاف وهيدا اللي